Can a security guard in a store detain you if they suspect you of shoplifting? Can they physically detain you? Can they detain your belongings? Can they search your belongings? Can they insist that you come back into the store? Can they insist on seeing your receipt? All of these questions surrounding several emails that I've received over the last week or two, so I thought I'd combine them into one video. Some of the complaints I agree with, and I think they are well-founded, and some of them I don't agree with. So this video is an amalgamation of several of those complaints and what I think. And just for the avoidance of doubt, it is not legal advice pertaining to any one individual that's emailed me, it's just general guidance. And so there's a lot of misconceptions around about security guards detaining you when you enter a store. And so if they suspect you of shoplifting, they can indeed detain you using reasonable force. And I refer now to the Criminal Law Act of 1967, where this refers to a person, not just a constable, but a person using force to make an arrest, may use such force as is reasonable in the circumstances in the prevention of crime, or in effecting or assisting in the lawful arrest of offenders or suspected offenders, or of persons unlawfully at large. And this in combination with Section 24A of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act 1984, which is arrest without a warrant as it applies to other persons. So as it sets out in subsection 1, a person other than a constable may arrest without a warrant anyone who is in the act of committing an indictable offence, or anyone who he has reasonable grounds for suspecting to be committing an indictable offence. Now, some of the confusion around shoplifting, or low-value shoplifting as it is referred to in legislation, that being goods that allegedly stolen are £200 in value or less, comes from the fact that this low-value shoplifting is now ordinarily dealt with summarily, meaning it can only be heard in the magistrate's court and will not be sent to the Crown Court. But this makes it a hybrid offence. And there's an interesting bit in the Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act of 2014, which made various changes in Section 176 with particular regard to low-value shoplifting. And as you can see here, it says subsection 6 provides that certain powers conferred by the Police and Criminal Evidence Act 1984 on the police and others in respect of indictable offences, which would ordinarily include theft and shoplifting as it originally was, remain available in respect of low-value shoplifting, notwithstanding that it's reclassified as summary only. The powers concerned include a power of arrest exercisable by a person other than a constable, for example, a store detective, powers enabling police officers to enter and search premises and vehicles in various circumstances for the purposes of searching for evidence, in connection with an investigation or arresting individuals suspected of committing offences, and powers enabling a magistrate to authorise such entry and search. So this power of arrest, even as it applies to a store detective, remains in place as it applies to low-value shoplifting, where the value of the goods is £200 or less. Now, in many cases, the value of the goods is very much more. So some cases are in excess of £500, £600, £700, even in a small handful or armful of items, where people have stuffed them inside their coat or brazenly walked out with them, as you might have seen in recent social media videos. Now, they can be detained by the store detectives. Now, again, a lot of people are saying that these store detectives are not detaining them. I suspect because they fear for their own safety, because they don't want to get attacked in response to detaining them for the shoplifting. But as I mentioned earlier, there is a provision in the Criminal Law Act of 1967 to use such force as is reasonable in the circumstances. And so that is an objective test. It is a reasonableness test, which some have observed is a little bit dated and a little bit difficult to understand. But it remains the case that it is still what is a reasonable amount of force used in the circumstances. So if the circumstances dictate a little bit more force, for example, the suspect is acting very much more aggressively and very much more brazenly with their shoplifting, then it stands to reason that more force is reasonable in those circumstances, because the court will look at each individual case on its own merits. So in one such case, for example, where a store detective is detaining a brazen and aggressive shoplifter, they would arguably be able to use more force than had they just been walking out, got stopped by a tag that they didn't realise that was there, and obviously they wouldn't manhandle them to the ground. Now, that brings us to one of the complaints that was brought to me in an email, whereby somebody had gone through the checkouts, they had a security tag on one of the items, that was removed, they walked out, the machines beeped, and then the security guard came over and said, I need to bring you back in to have a check whether there's any tags on the items, etc., as they ordinarily would do. And the person refused, even though they had a receipt and they paid, etc. So there was a bit of a standoff between this individual and the security guards. Now, I can perfectly understand that the person might feel slightly aggrieved in that they're being asked to go back in the store when they've had the tags removed, they've been checked, they've got a receipt, they've walked out. Now, also, the complaint, a hybrid complaint in a separate email when in a similar scenario to this, is that the security guard searched through the bag outside of the store. So they'd already left the store and they chased down this individual and they searched their bag. Now, I'm not naming any particular store here that did exactly this, but I am told that one of them did. Now, make no mistake, the law I've set out does not allow the store detectives or security guards to search through your bags either inside or outside of the store. They shouldn't be doing that. That would be trespass to your property. Now, would it be reasonable to allow them to look through the bag? I personally don't have a problem with that because I know that it's far easier to just let them see inside the bag and then I'm on my way whilst they are trying to prevent genuine theft in the store. And as it happens, most of the people in the stores that I go to have seen me coming and going quite often. So even when it beeps, they sometimes just say to me, don't worry about it, carry on, because they've searched my bag in the past and they trust me and there's no problem with that. But taking the scenario where the machine has beeped, it's clearly that one individual, there is a reasonable suspicion of shoplifting. Whether it's a founded one is an entirely other matter. I understand that people will be upset about being accused of shoplifting or even suspected of shoplifting when they haven't done so. But if the machine beeps, the security officers cannot know any different. All they know is it's beeped. And for them, it's a binary indication. It either doesn't beep or it beeps. And if it beeps, then it suggests that there's a tag that hasn't been deactivated. Now, there's another good reason why you might want the tags deactivated, because many of these tags that are attached, let's say, to clothing, will explode dye all over the clothing when you get outside the store. There's an interesting legal question as to whose responsibility that is. Now, if you've gone through the checkout and through the security barriers and it's beeped and blown up, then arguably, whilst it's your property, the onus is on the store to have removed the tag. So that's one potential complaint, that the failure to remove the tag has now damaged your clothing and you would rightfully want the clothing replaced because the store should have removed the tag. But in the scenario where it's not clothing and it's just a tag that they've forgotten to remove, you still want it removed. Let's say, for example, I don't know why this would happen, but let's say you did have something that was in one of those plastic security boxes and it wasn't removed. You can't really remove it without smashing and damaging the box. That is arguably criminal damage because it's not your property. The box, the security box, is not your property. As I said, I don't know why that would happen, but by the by. But if that were the case and it beeped, then you could quite rightly be asked to go back in and have it removed. Personally, I don't have a problem with that because I think it's far quicker to just go back inside, get it dealt with, get the tag removed, and I'm on my way. I would object, however, if there was no beep and there was no reasonable ground to suspect me of shoplifting, and I was detained physically when I wasn't resisting, and they searched my bags and all manner of things. Now, I'm not saying this happened in any one particular store, but I've had hints of bits of each of those happen in different scenarios, and many of those would be unlawful. For example, if I walked out of a store and the barriers beeped to suggest that there was a security tag, and let's say I just turned around in confusion and then suddenly a security guard grabbed me and dragged me back inside, in my view, that would be unlawful force because it's not reasonable. Because if I stopped and turned around with a look of confusion on my face, as I would do because I'd be, well, what's beeping? If they physically dragged me inside, I think that's unlawful force. If I made off and ran off and then they came and physically restrained me to stop me from running away, that is preventing me from escaping, and that would amount to a lawful arrest of a suspected shoplifter. So the scenarios dictate really what would ultimately be or not be reasonable force in those circumstances. And as I say, that it's the circumstances really that will be considered as to whether any force used was lawful. But when it comes to bags and things like that, without your consent, they cannot just search through your bags. They don't have a power to search. If you consent, as I probably would, I would just say, by all means, take a look. I haven't taken anything I shouldn't have. And even in the event that there was something there that, let's say, I'd forgotten to scan or didn't scan properly or whatever, then if the worst happened and they tried to charge me with shoplifting, I would then set out my defense and say, well, I spent whatever, £150 on shopping. Am I really going to steal this £2 packet of chocolate bars? It's unlikely. There is a reasonable doubt there, because if I've spent that much money on so many other items, and especially if I've had tags removed and all of these kind of things, then if there's one that slipped through the net because the machine didn't work, because those machines don't always work properly, sometimes you think you've scanned it, it beeps and you move on. And then I've looked at it later and instead it's actually said, do you want to add this item or remove this item? Now, if I didn't spot that and I just scanned the next one, then it might just carry on and then the previous item hasn't been scanned. And so there's always a possibility that this is just a pure accident. But in those circumstances, I would raise a defense and say, well, having spent this much money on all of these different things, it is highly unlikely that I would have deliberately stolen that one item, which is very low value. It's highly unlikely that I would have done that. And especially with my track record of shopping there on the self-scans, etc., then I would certainly hope and probably expect that a sensible conversation would take place and say, yes, I forgot to scan this one, or it didn't scan properly. Please charge me for it and I'll be on my way. So this, I hope, covers a few of the scenarios that I've had complaints about. As I say, some of them I agree with and some of them I don't necessarily agree with wholeheartedly. I understand why people make these complaints. I understand why people are upset about them. But we're in this age of a balance between the shops want to make more profits and therefore use the self-checkouts, which are more cost efficient, etc. But that also gives rise to a higher risk of theft. More people are committing theft. Theft is on the rise from shops, and they do have a difficult job of dealing with it. But my role in all of that, the way I see it, is the least friction to me, the least friction to the shop, cooperate where I can, where it's not overly inconvenient, allow them to run their business the way they see fit, and so they allow me to run my life the way I see fit, and everybody's happy. Obviously, it doesn't always work like that, but if you do have particular complaints, raise them with the store and discuss them amicably. They will probably be reasonable with you. And if not, then you can take it further. But as some people have suggested, they want to take things straight to a legal route immediately. I think that might be jumping the gun a little bit, and it might be causing you more stress than is absolutely necessary. So I hope this video, by way of guidance, is useful to you. Please make sure you subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.